So we have a really interesting situation because Reddit was very confused about this artist's art style, and the artist insists it's not Gen AI. So everything kicks off with this subreddit r/Reddit gets drawn badly. It is literally what the name of the subreddit is. Artists will go into the subreddit and they'll showcase maybe some photos of their art and be like, hey, I want to draw so and so really badly, like your username really badly. Or people will post photos of themselves or their pets being like, please draw me, or please draw my pet, or please draw both of us, you know? It's a fun little subreddit and there's a lot of beautiful art in here. So AI generated work, by the way, is not allowed in the subreddit. But anyways, somebody had made a post with their cute little dog being like, please draw my dog. And somebody who was actively posting in the subreddit hopped in. The individual who does drawings does a lot of semi-realism style pet portraits, and they've been posting actively in the subreddit, being like, oh, I will draw your pet. A lot of people were commenting and they were drawing a lot of, pet portraits for people. There was a whole other side thing that happened with a drawing they did of a cat where people were talking about how that looks Gen AI. But the really big one is the drawing of the dog in question, because that got a lot more people debating. In fact, it was screenshotted and then posted to a different subreddit, r/isThisAI, where a user writes, is this drawing on r/Reddit gets drawn badly AI? The eyes really bug me and it has that piss filter. And they add, I tried confronting the user about this and got a somewhat weird response. Second slide. I personally draw an ibis paint and the brushstrokes on their piece look really unnatural. It really looks like they took the photo, put it into an AI filter, then cropped it into ibis paint. Please prove my suspicions wrong. By the way, to give you a little bit more context for their art style, this is an example of a dog and then their drawing of a dog. So they do like photorealism. Here's another side-by-side one, and then the dog. And so this is the drawing of the dog. And so after looking at other examples of this person's artwork, it looks in a pretty different style, a much more cartoony style than the semi-realism and realism pieces they were doing before. Again, no one's saying that like artists are not allowed to change their art style, but this was like a shift between only a couple days. And then there's already some interesting things with the original art pieces that the artist was putting out. Notably, again, this was one of the dog examples I showed you prior. It's like basically traced, just kind of like the photo of the dog painted over a little bit. Now, again, this isn't like a high stakes thing by any means, because these are just like, free little doodles of people's pets. So is it like world shattering? Absolutely not, right? It's very lighthearted. No harm, no foul, I suppose, because it's a free thing. It gets a little more interesting, which is why we're kind of talking about the situation. Because again, after looking at this dog picture and stuff and OP being like, hey, maybe this is AI generated, they left a comment being like, hey, no offense, but it kind of looks like AI. So sorry if I'm wrong. The artist replied, I mean, you are wrong. I am very against AI, and it's super infuriating when my work gets credited by a bot. And of course, I do understand that with Gen AI becoming more popular, a lot of legitimate artists are getting falsely accused for using Gen AI when you legitimately drew the art pieces yourself. So it's really frustrating. It's been happening a lot more. And I can really empathize with that level of frustration and the accusation that you might be under, because it feels like your work is being discredited. And then OP adds an update, writing, updates, they provided an image of the layers and now I'm really conflicted. Why is the rough sketch and line art the same? It's also uncommon for artists to name their layers. So this was the additional proof that was provided. So they're using a drawing program called Ibis Paint, which is typically used for phones and tablets, although this says Ibis Paint for Windows and Mac. So I guess there's like a Windows version. I haven't heard of it, but that's sick. They have 9 layers, one of them being the background. So 8 layers with artwork on it. And what is interesting is one, they've labeled all of their layers. So layers, when they default, they'll just be like layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4. You can go in and rename your layers. Now, it's not particularly common for artists to rename their layers because a lot of artists are kind of lazy. So we're just kind of like, okay, well, whatever. And we just eyeball it, right? Some artists would rename layers to where it makes sense if it's really complicated. For instance, like if there's a bajillion layers, you might make a folder called like fur and just put all the fur related layers in there, and then make a folder called like face and then put all the face related stuff in there, specifically naming every single layer. We have sketch parentheses rough, sketch, line art parentheses color, shadows, base colors, fur details, highlights parentheses fur. A lot of people were pointing out the fact that that felt really overkill and that typically artists don't do that. Again, not saying it's impossible. Let me know in the comments if you're an artist who likes to have very detailed names for your layers. It's pretty uncommon, so I'm just actually genuinely really curious. But what other people were pointing out, the fact that it's really weird, the artist has all of their sketch and line art layers below the base color. Now, that maybe could make sense if this was an art piece with no line art. As in, they did a little bit of line work and they painted over it, and so it's an art style where the line art wouldn't be visible. An example is this person's older work, right? There is no line art in this piece, but this piece is a cartoony style. There is line art in it. So why is the line art layer beneath all of the coloring layers? And for some extra context, it would make sense if they turned all of these layers into like modified layers. So they were like multiply layers, darken layers, whatever, right? So if you have your liner on a multiply layer and you paint over that, that would make sense as to why your line art is going to be beneath all of your coloring layers. However, it's not, because as you can see, it says normal, 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 normal. So there is no like modification turned on for any of these layers that would make sense for why the line art is beneath all of the coloring. So those two combined makes it pretty suspicious to people that this seems a little off. A commenter says, "Hello, artist here. No freaking artist draws like this. The multiple weird line art layers just gets in the way while coloring." Another person adds, "I'm an artist that uses multiple weird line art layers to make different coloring and other effects, but this still looks BS for me for other reasons." Another user writes, "Professional artist here. Layers are definitely unorthodox, but what is labeled is not an impossible workflow. Sketch and line art are very similar, but they could have duplicated the sketch and cleaned up for line art, and painting over line art is something some artists do. That said, there are some things that make my head tilt. From the layer previews, it looks like there are areas that are not covered. We should be seeing some gaps. I'm also not sure why the shadows are below the base colors. Without the working file in hand, I can't say with certainty if this is AI or not. I do see artistic liberties taken, and there are differences between the photo and drawing. This could be a situation where somebody used an AI filter on the photo and then painted over it. My advice would be to see if you can find more art by the same user and compare. How similar is their art from the first image? Does their other art look like AI?" And again, I think it's a very valid point. So then when we compare it to a previous example of their work, when you see that it's pretty traced off the original image, it has me scratching my head a little bit where it's like, okay, we don't have any examples actually from this person of a cartoony looking pet portrait, because all we have are these kind of like semi-realistic paintovers. But I definitely do agree, because if you look at the coloring layers, of which there are 4, because there's only 8 layers with line art and color on it, right? One is the white background. The 4 with color, as you can see here, it's a little bit hard to see. There is no color placed on the muzzle. There is a little dot here, but we first off have no color placed on the muzzle. If we look at the final image, if these are the actual layers turned on, the muzzle should be white, like the same white as the background. But the second thing I want to point out to you, look at the nose. Where is the nose colored in on all the layers? There's only 4 layers with coloring, and nowhere do I see a big dollop for the dog's nose. So why in the image preview is the nose fully rendered in? The math is not making sense to me. Amongst other details that also don't make sense to me is because if you look at the top of the dog's head, as you can see, there is a curvature here, right? Because it's like a border collie. There's the white muzzle and the white fur goes in between the eyes. It covers part of the forehead, but the rest of the dog's head is very black with like a couple of like, light brown details sprinkled in. The top of the head, all of this part here should all be blacked in because that's the color of the dog's fur. We don't see that in any of the layers either. There is no like black fur for the dome of the head. But we see that in the preview for the final product. So where did that go? Also, we don't see any eye colors. The dog's eyes are brown, and you can see it's lined in the line work. There are no brown irises that I can see in any of the coloring layers. So what exactly is happening here? Because why am I seeing all this color for the final product of the dog that is not visible in any of the layers? Another user took the original image that a person posted about the dog, being like, why is it like this? And then they attached another photo of the dog, but this is from the proof the artist provided, where you can see the dog and the layers. And they write, these 2 pictures are not the same. Look at the texture of the nose and the black dots near it. They changed it. So if you put the 2 images side by side, right, this one was the original one, and this one was the second one with the layers. These are not the same drawing. They're close, but it's not the same. This one, the print on the top of the dog's head, it's split in the middle, right? We have a little bit of like a heart shape. There's like a line going through here. On this side of the dog's head, these are like full and complete hearts that are happening here. That's not here. The dog's nose here has these like white highlights on the rim of the nostril, and there's no highlight for this nostril. It's only for this one. And if you look here, the dog kind of has a whisker coming out of the bottom of his mouth here, and that is not present for this dog. Instead, there is a white dot here. there is like a line coming this way on the second dog that is a much more rendered out like clip art style for the first dog. The first dog has a little bit of fading happening in the corner here. The fur is rendered very differently on the second dog. Even if you look at the shape of the line art on the side of the muzzle here, for the first dog versus the one with the layers, these two are also not the same. And then here, I mean, you can see the white goes all the way down for the curve of the ear and it stops halfway for the curve of this ear. These are just a few examples, but as you can see, like, I mean, the eyes, three white dots in the eye for the first dog. There's only two for the eye of the second dog. These are not the same dog drawings. Another commenter overlaps a bunch of layers, writing, "This is what their art looks like after enhancing their visible layers and overlapping the end result, while using the eyes, ears, and cheek fluff for proportions. Extremely AI, LMAO. They also did art of another user's pet dog, and it's so clearly AI. Their bio on their profile right now says, "Now I have too many art styles." And this is what happens when you overlay all the work. More so, a lot of stuff doesn't line up, as in all the line art isn't matching. Like here, the eyes match, but the right cheek is too big, the shoulder of the dog is way too far out, and the nose line art doesn't match at all with where the nose is actually positioned. Another user checked this person's image for synth ID, and it came back as, yes, generated with open AI tools. By the way, they checked only the layers, not the full image, just the layers, and the layers came back as being AI generated. But OP posted that, right? And was like, hey, you know, I can't believe you unless maybe you can show yourself erasing what's on some of the layers to show that you can access the layers, right? And the artist was like, hello, I can't move said layers over. And I have read a lot of it again. If you read my previous comment, not everybody has to like my art or my style. This is just how I like to draw, and I'm happy with how it came out. And it seems the OP was as well. And the commenter was like, well, why can't you move the layers over? I definitely think it was a kind gesture of you no matter what. But I do think using extremely unethical sources like AI and AI filters isn't great for just drawing somebody's dog on Reddit. Your own creative drawing skills would automatically be 100,000 times more meaningful and sincere. No matter what, I'm sure your art is great and that you're very skilled. Another person adds, they completely ignored what I said about the Synth ID AI watermark embedded into their image. Because how do you argue against that without having to claim you actually drew OpenAI's hidden AI identifying watermark pattern for funsies, but later responded to somebody else and pulled the, quote, "there is some sort of language barrier as I'm using a translator," end quote card. So yeah, I mean, we have the final conclusion because it was flagged as being AI generated, but honestly, it's kind of wild. At the end of the day, don't send hate to any parties involved. This is just like silly stuff on the internet, right? But we can talk and laugh about silly stuff on the internet. And it's kind of just funny the lengths people would go to like lie on the internet, I suppose, because what they're doing is like a good deed at the end of the day, drawing people's pets. But I mean, the subreddit is anti-AI. AI is not allowed. So people who are asking for images were thinking and expecting hand-drawn work. Some people were applying, being like, oh, thank you for making human-made art of my dog. And then, you know, we have an instance of them doing this. I think it kind of just ends up being a situation where sometimes people just want some, like, you know, they feel good when people appreciate what they do. And sometimes maybe it involves like crossing some lines to get that like feel good compliment from somebody who's happy about the dog drawing that you did for them, even if maybe you yourself didn't draw it. So with that, what are your thoughts on this entire thing? People be lying on the internet all the time anyway. So just another one of those things that happen. But I just wanted to share it with you because I thought it was very silly. And with that, if you like this video, I appreciate it if you like and subscribe. Don't forget to check me out on Etsy. I have digital art there like emotes and overlays. I also stream on Twitch 3 days a week, Mondays and Saturdays at 6 p.m. PST, and Thursdays at 7:30, where I do a podcast with my friend. I will also be going to Canada soon to visit my friends. I'm very excited. And I want to do longer videos for y'all, but I've been doing a lot of traveling because my grandma's ill, so I keep going up to visit her. So anyways, hopefully soon I can make some longer videos. I hope to catch you guys on my Twitch streams or in another one of my videos. Peace.